Welcome back, everybody, to Just Keep Parenting. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about Mr. Rogers and his thoughts and helpful hints about pets. Pets in families, pets for little children, right? I've been thinking about, we have a tarantula and some fish in the classroom, and I've been thinking about, because we have a new semester starting, that there's a lot of teachers that don't like the tarantula. Oh, I can't believe you have a tarantula in your class, right? And I say to them, I don't love spiders, but I do love having pets that children can start to understand. They love to watch the spider. They love to draw the spider, right? They want to know how the spider eats. They want to know what the spider eats. They feed the fish. They talk about the fish. They name the fish, right? These are all important things in children's lives. Why? Why are pets important to children, right? Mr. Rogers says, it's a quote, and I'm not sure if it's a quote from him or just a quote from the book, but our daughter was snapping her fingers in front of our dog's face. It was just playful teasing, but I asked her not to do it and told her that it makes the dog feel bad. She seemed so surprised and said to me, I didn't know dogs had feelings. So having pets help children understand the world better. Many times when we have new preschoolers come to the classroom, we talk about the fact that when we look at the fish, we're welcome to look at it and just put our hand up on the fish tank, but that when we knock on the fish tank, and the same thing with the spider, it scares them. It's like somebody knocking on our window, right? We don't know who it is. And so we talk about gentleness, right? And how to treat pets. And much of it's just how we treat each other, right? So Mr. Rogers, he talks about how pets can be a trusted companion, right, who gives unconditional love, a companion when no one else will play, a smaller creature over whom children have some control, and a comforter on difficult days. As I read this chapter this week, one of the things I thought about was my dog Mitzi. My parents used to come to Utah a lot, and we were old enough to be left, right? And this dog came, somebody dropped it off, and we brought it into the house. And we hadn't been really a pet family. We lived on a farm. So the farm animals were in the barn, right? And out in the field. And I just remember Mitzi died while I was serving a mission over in Japan. And I remember coming home and being so sad, right? That this dog that had been through a lot of my life. Sorry, I wasn't anticipating getting all emotional. But I watched my dad, and we thought we had the dog for us, right? But I saw my dad, bring Mitzi into the house and sit her on the couch. My dad loved that dog as well, right? So pets have a way of being that comforter on difficult days as well. Even though children sometimes aren't completely ready for the responsibility of having a pet, right? It can help them with that. It can help them learn about discipline, and it can also help them learn about death. As Mr. Roger talks about some of the things that, the hints, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But I remember here, we've had 4 or 5 tarantulas that have died. We've had rabbits that have died. And those kids processing, right? We had a fish that died because it jumped out of the tank. We had too much water. And I remember back in the day, the kids had Ghostbuster signs. No jumping. And so it was a great literacy piece for us, right? But it was part of the grieving for the children to be able to say, no, fish, don't jump, because if you jump, you're going to die, right? We've had rocks outside in our playground that have the spiders' names on them, the tarantulas' names on them, right? I remember a funeral that we had, and it was raining, and the kids had made different notes to put in the tarantulas. I think it was probably Harry in his grave, right? And so being able to help kids process with that. There are some challenges, right? Which is why we find a lot of houses who don't have pets, right? Because kids have to be reminded, right? They're not able to handle, young children are not able to handle much of the responsibility that's involved in caring for a pet, right? They have to be reminded of their routines, right? Like washing their hands, feeding their pet, brushing their teeth, even those things, right? They have to be reminded of. And so it is possible that through through time, a pet can help a child learn to be a responsible caregiver, but they're not going to be able to get it at the very beginning, right? And as caregivers and adults and parents in their life, we shouldn't anticipate that they can. Children are not naturally gentle, not all of them, right, in caring for a pet. Sometimes a pet is like a toy for them, right? And so we might hold it upside down, and as we talk about it with dramatic play and babies, right, they have to be reminded about how to gently take care of them. Preschoolers don't see things from someone else's point of view, and so they can't do that, and sometimes we ask them to do that. They may not even realize that a pet is a living creature because it's different than us. So how do we learn to respect animals, right? How do we as adults help them to learn to respect animals? We see a lot of animals that are given human qualities in movies and books. They wear clothes, right? He says, in fact, it's often through stuffed animals and picture books that the relationship between children and animals begins. I love that. They start it then, right? But the children soon find out that real animals wiggle out of baby carriages and they don't like to be dressed up. So then we have to think about gentleness and respect, right? How do we teach that to children? And doing that through babies, doing that through stuffed animals, helping them to learn those skills. So what do we do about parents and pets, right? Because parents need to be partners with children if we're going to have pets. Sharing the work of feeding, caring for, cleaning up after a pet. We need to make sure children don't get overburdened, right, by a responsibility that they may not be ready for yet. I think if they're ready, that's great, but we have to check it out. And then he goes on to talk about how we have to think about small things, right? Maybe it's best to have a small pet at the beginning. And I tell my teachers all the time, I don't love tarantulas, but they are an easy pet to have in a cage. You throw crickets in, you have some water in there for the crickets, and it's quite easy for me to take care of, and quite easy for the kids, right? I love the fact that Mr. Rogers talks about we can teach children about limits by having pets. Right, we talk to them about where they can play, where they need to go to the bathroom, and it's a nice transition for the kids to see that, oh, we have boundaries, we have limits with the pets as well. They start to learn about that and can make that connection between the boundaries that we have for them as well. So his last piece says, while pets generally add more complications to a household, they also add an enriching dimension to the many layers of caring and confirmation of family life. So it's a big decision, right, to have a pet. Lots of things to think about. Some of the helpful hints that he goes through are, considering a smaller pet, right, because you don't want something that's terribly demanding at the beginning, and they start to learn about animals in a simple way. The next thing he talks about is before bringing a pet home is to remember that children are impulsive, right? That's part of who they are. And being able to practice gentle touching before you bring a pet into your home. Then he talks about when a pet is scurrying around, right, or a cat is meowing, to say to your child, what do you think he or she wants, right? What do you think your cat is trying to say? So that they can start to develop the feelings and how to respond, right, with compassion. And then he does a whole 5 or 6 more on when a pet dies, right, and all the good things that can come from that. It just reminds us, right, both young and old, that sad things happen in life. And so being able to let them grieve on their own, right? Encourage your child to talk about pet's death. Mr. Rogers has some great books on the death of a pet. Being able to show them how to keep their pet alive in their hearts and what that sounds like and looks like. Playing with a stuffed animal, right, can help them get over that grieving, not get over, but go through that grieving period until there's maybe a time for a replacement, if that's something that the family decides on. And then recognizing that a lot of what we think about when we think about death, we have a lot of mystery around that, right? And so being able to help the children understand, right? So when a pet dies, being literal with them, when a pet dies, it doesn't need to eat, it doesn't need to sleep, he can't see, he can't hear, right? He isn't breathing and moving anymore, and he's not going to come to life again, right? So talking in those literal terms to your children, because they are literal beings, will be helpful to them. Then the other thing is just recognize that if your child needs a funeral, right, for that pet, to be able to have a little time to talk about memories, talk about the things that the pet has taught them, and be able to lay them to rest. We've had some pretty experiences with that here in the lab school with children when our pets die. So think about pets, think about the responsibilities that come along with it, think about what it can teach our children, and then decide if it's right for your family or not. Thanks for joining us. Talk about pets and Mr. Rogers. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.